Hey everyone, welcome to the Lever Movement Podcast. My name is Evan Schwartz, your host. Today I am joined by Aaron Geiser. Aaron, how are you doing today?
Fantastic, Evan. How are you?
I am great. We are kicking off the Lever Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Can you give us just a little bit of a background about who you are and what you do before we dive too much into things so people kind of have a little bit more context before we talk about everything we're going to talk about today?
Absolutely. And it's a pleasure to be on today. To give a little bit of background to myself, I am a coach with the EndureIQ squad. This is Dr. Dan Plews. It's his kind of training squad. He is the world record holder in the age group division and as a world championship in Ironman distance in Kona. And a little bit more about me, I am also a USA Triathlon level one triathlon coach. I'm also a level 3 certified cycling coach. I am a run and gait analysis specialist, as well as a triathlete and athlete myself. And I currently am a world record qualifier, or not world record, but a Ironman world championship qualifier, and as well as a USAT triathlon All-American, and I am a Ironman All World Gold Athlete.
Those are so many things. It seems usually I find, especially talking to different coaches and athletes, but people that get super into, triathlon in general, move up to maybe half Ironman, and then you get into coaching and it is just that whole culture. And it's just this whole kind of like universe contained in itself that you end up, working with the top minds in the sport, or the sports, I should say. And then you end up getting involved in things like EndureIQ, which we're going to talk plenty about too. But then also, that personal involvement you have as an athlete, I feel like carries a ton of value when you end up working with other, athletes that might join the training squad, or you might be looking for coaching and stuff like that. So I think it's incredibly valuable, not only to have all that expertise and that background that you have in the education and the certifications, but to be an athlete yourself and to know what it's like. I feel like that is super, super powerful. How did you get into doing triathlon in the first place?
Well, I had a previous career in baseball, and in the translation from that to everyday lifestyle for me, it there was one thing that was kind of missing in my day-to-day experiences in life, and it was kind of the competitive aspect. I wasn't any longer more in workouts. I was more competing against that day or that particular workout. And sometimes you can keep afloat with that for a long period of time, but there is a time where that either gets a little bit boring or monotonous, and you just start to, I don't want to say I go through the motions in anything I do, but there was a little bit of almost just kind of building up to get to that point. It took a little bit, maybe longer, to get into workouts that particular day or whatever it might have been. So I had a family member that had done a number of triathlons, and probably I got to give him credit. He wore me down to a certain extent, and ended up signing up for a half Ironman for my first event. Never really having a background in swimming, in cycling, or in long distance running.
Mhm.
So it was kind of a all jump in type of deal. And as I said, he kind of just wore me down, and I said, fine, let's do it. And I, to prepare myself for the first event, I signed up for a couple of Olympic and sprint distance, just to make sure where I was and to have a little bit of a measuring stick of going into that first event. And I remember my first event was in Muncie, Indiana, which you can have some jokes about that area because one of my favorite TV shows is Park and Recreation, and they always kind of had a little bit of joke of Muncie, Indiana, but it kind of sticks with me. The first event I ever did, it was snowing that morning. The water was the warmest part of the day.
Oh man.
And that includes the shower afterwards because the place that I was staying did not have warm hot water. So it was just one of those days that is extremely memorable. And after that event, I think I ended up finished. I podiumed in that first event, and at that point, the hooks were kind of stuck into me. And ever since, it's just been, I don't want to say an addiction, but it's been an outlet for me to kind of tame some of that competitive spirit that really drove earlier in my life and kind of led me up to present day.
Mhm. One thing that I'm super curious about, because I am typically a runner and recently got more into cycling, being here in Boulder, Colorado, it's almost like that's a natural sort of progression for people. And I've gotten in the pool a few times, but the thing that I'm always curious about is when you go down the road of triathlon and you set your sights on something like the half Ironman, which I feel like is so motivating for people because it is that real challenge. It's covering that 70.3 all in one separate activity, three different sports. But how did you find the progression from signing up for something like a sprint or Olympic, and what did you find as the sort of like resources that drove you along the way, and what maybe kept you motivated to get all the way to the start and then finish line and then the cold shower after your first race?
I Evan, the best way that I can answer that is I've always been a fairly motivated individual. So that was never really something that I needed to flip, a switch that I never needed to flip on
Mhm.
once I signed up for that first event. And
Mhm.
I think it was more about consistently improving.
Mhm.
So we do all of these sports, as you talked about, whether it's hopping in the pool, whether it's getting on the bike, whether it's running, whether it's a lot of different activities. We have these measuring sticks after that point that you've done it. And every time you go out, you want to try to increase that productivity or make it easier and just kind of build upon that process. And I think that in the grand scheme of things, looking back, it was that opportunity to just get marginally better every single day I did the activity.
Mhm.
And within that, it, it it just kind of bred a level of intensity. It bred a level of just maybe motivation, if you want, but that opportunity to just get slightly better in that particular discipline each day that I stepped foot in that arena, if we want to call it that,
Mhm.
was just an opportunity. And it was invigorating just because especially when you were first getting into the sport, you make these large gains as long as you stick with it and you do it repetitively, you're going to make these big gains. And I found that to be kind of the process, was that where you might get into the water and you might swim 100 yards in 100, or like a 1 minute and 55 seconds, and then next thing you know, you're down in the 140s, and then now the next thing you know, you're under 130, and you're just always kind of meeting these marks. You're now doing the same bike workout that you did 3 months ago at a lot, like 30 more watts, but a lower heart rate. So by
Mhm.
doing it kind of in that right way, it just allows you to kind of measure day in, day out. And now with all the different types of technology advancements in all of these sports, you have so many things that you can get your hands on to measure your output, to measure your success. There's so many things, and I find that I've had a lot of fun connecting with a lot of these technology companies and implementing some of their technologies into my training protocols for myself and my athletes. And it just gives you something to work for on a day-to-day,
Mhm.
week-to-week basis.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and that's that thing we've seen maybe from early 2000s to even like 2010. And then over the past 10 years, the advancement specifically in endurance sports tech has been amazing. You don't just have to go from, talking about to, going to full carbon on the bike and stuff, or like the new running shoes with all the carbon fiber plates and different, the goggles when you're swimming that actually show, your time and your split. Like everything has, turned over in terms of like the endurance sports tech, which I think has made the process, for some people more enjoyable. Other people saying, oh well, back in my day, we had take our 40-pound bikes and go do time trials on that and stuff. The other thing I'm curious too, which I am loving your journey getting into the sport too, but how did you get into coaching? Like I said at the very kind of beginning, it seems like a lot of highly motivated people get into triathlon, start doing half Ironman, do full Ironman, and then you learn so much along the way and you just get connected with the community that you end up being able to pass on all that knowledge to other people that are getting into it too. So can you share your coaching journey with us as well?
I can definitely do that. And really, I think it goes back to just my upbringing. I come from a lot. My mother was a coach. My father was a coach. My brother was a coach. So really growing up and having that community and environment that I grew up in, I think from a very, very young age, I saw that we had our family had a big to do with the development of people along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, I think it just was a natural progression for me with the knowledge that I had and the way that I communicate with individuals. It was a very natural progression for me as well. And by taking some of the things that I saw my parents do and my brother do with their athletes, with everything that they were involved in, was just a very, very natural and organic development for me. And when you kind of realize that maybe your sports career has a certain ceiling, but yet you have so much knowledge that you can provide to others, it's kind of a way to give back. And one of the things, especially early in just getting into triathlon, I would always have individuals talk to me about, well, you have a great knowledge in this. Have you been doing it for a really long time? And no, it was just me really getting down into the weeds and learning things about the sport, about how to train more efficiently. It's not always about doing it this way. It's about doing it these other ways. And as you said, you're really in most aspects, you're working with athletes that are type A personality. They're go, 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 go. And really what we found out from a scientific aspect is that it's not the most efficient and functional way to kind of evolve and develop as an athlete.
Mm-hmm.
It's by taking yourself to the well 6, 7, 8 days or workouts a week, you end up kind of stunting your growth and development. And when I was seeing individuals continue to go about this in a way that maybe prevented them from being their best self, that's when kind of the progression to me into coaching really kind of opened its doors. And I walked through that door just because it was an opportunity to really share some of that knowledge and then to watch individuals go through that process and really start to expand upon really things that they thought that they were limited by
Mm-hmm.
has been, a very, very rewarding aspect, I guess.
Yeah, and that's the thing that maybe keeps you in the coaching is seeing all those athletes, that you have a direct impact on, reach their, successes, go through those trials and tribulations, and you have to work with them on that one-on-one case, but then you end up being part of that success and that buildup. And it is just so incredibly motivating to stick in it because, being an athlete is hard. Doing triathlon is, one of the hardest things that I can conceptualize. But then coaching that and putting all those pieces together and working with all the individual use cases, that's what really helps superstar coaches shine and stand out from the rest too.
And I really agree with that comment. And one of the things that I get questioned a lot because I have athletes that are competing for their first Ironman, and then I have individuals that are becoming pros or working to become pros. So I really work with a lot of different levels through that process. And people ask me, so is there one target or type of athlete that you really look for? And my answer traditionally has been no,
Mm-hmm.
because I find from all levels, it's super, super interesting. You have different personalities. one experience with one person might lead you to provide a better experience for somebody else. So I think all of these things kind of play back as long as you absorb, just like everything, as long as you absorb the opportunities, you're going to be able to help somebody along the way. And I find that over the course of time, you end up kind of welcoming all these new individuals into your family. They're now part of. You're inviting them over for dinner if they are local athletes. You're talking to them almost as much as your significant other on certain times, and they're really just become part of your ecosystem and just part of your life. And then you start to look at, well, what would I do without these individuals?
Exactly. You have those chats about somebody getting ready to do their super long brick workout, or that almost seems like it's normal dinner table conversation after a point, just because it gets so integrated into your flow and stuff. I want to switch gears a little bit, because you've hinted at a couple different lines of thought that I think are super interesting and relevant to the Lever Movement podcast. And one of the first things being, technique work, and another being talking about how hard the sport is in general. And the sort of question that I kind of want to introduce as we start to talk about bodyweight support a little bit is the advancement in running technology you kind of hit on. Do you have any sort of tools, and this can be swim, bike, or run, that you've noticed have like really made an impact, but helped with recovery and helped athletes be more consistent? Because I believe that is probably the one point to like ring home that you talked about earlier, was that consistency over time in this multidiscipline approach. I think that is one of the most important and overlooked points, because it's not a super sexy concept, just being consistent and doing the work day in and day out. There have to be magic workouts, there have to be secrets that people are implementing. But can you maybe talk to that acceleration, the running technology, things that you've seen sort of catch on over time?
Well, I think that there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot to digest in that particular aspect of things, but I think it's a very valuable piece to talk, because, I mean, whether it be from a swimming standpoint, or whether it be from a biking standpoint, or whether it be from a run standpoint, you're going to have these tools and these pieces that are going to be implemented that are going to allow you to measure output, or, as you said, improve recovery, or just allow you to be consistent. And it is, as a coach, it's always nice when you have an athlete that has that consistency, that has the compliance on a week in, week out basis. And part of that is going to be how well they're recovering, how well they're sleeping. So with that, I mean, definitely the development of power meters on the bike, I think, have been huge. The especially for non-swimmers, tools like fins, tools like paddles, and tools like the pool buoy just allow individuals to kind of feel some of the connection with proper body alignment, or proper kicking technique, or again, the strength that it's going to take to move into the open water from the pool, with some of the strength work that you'll get from paddles. As far as, again, to go back a little bit to cycling, I think the indoor training aspect is a very valuable piece. I find that you can get a lot of us that are not in the area of Colorado and have great biking out just outside our door. Sometimes, anytime that we hit the open road, we might be taking a chance on our life on a day-to-day basis. So I think having the ability and the development of indoor trainers has been a key piece to the development of cyclists and triathletes. And then, as to move that into running, again, I find treadmill being a very, very important piece to the process. We now have the development with Stride and Run Pods, and giving power in that particular sense to give more of a measurement of your output. But I think it also, having the lever running system, I mean, I know, I'm here to talk about it, but I do find that implementing that into your running process, whether it be, you're in a run focus or whether you're in a cycling focus, I find that adding the lever system has really benefited from keeping your legs fresh while still being able to get some time on the legs, callus those legs to a certain extent, as a running term that comes out. But I do feel like this lever system is a very, very good piece to add into your weaponry, as whether it be just a runner or if you're a triathlete in that sense.
Yeah. And, at Lever, we know all about body weight support and maybe how to implement it. But for an athlete who is maybe brand new to using the treadmill, or they're leaning into it more as a treadmill tool, or they have a fantastic coach that is maybe recommending, hey, we might consider implementing this into our training routine. How would you maybe explain body weight support and how it can be integrated into a normal training routine for a healthy athlete that is training for their big goals for the next upcoming season?
Well, there's a couple of different ways that we could probably explain that, Evan. And it's one of the first pieces is just the amount of force that every time we take a step, we are translating force through our bones, our joints, our muscles. And anytime that you can take off a little bit of that weight, you are going to kind of elongate the health of all of those factors, whether it be tendons, whether it be joints, whether it be ligaments, and whether it be muscles. So anytime that you can incorporate something that's going to remove a little bit of weight off of your body, it's going to decrease the amount of stress. And really, in the whole aspect of training, it all relates back to stress. I mean, it's how much stress are you putting on your body, and stress comes from a lot of different ways, but I think a lot of people overlook the importance of how much stress training actually puts on your body. It releases a great deal of cortisol. It challenges your muscles, it challenges your ligaments, it challenges every part of our body. And by having the opportunity to just take off, whether it be 10 pounds or 15 pounds, think of if you're going out on a run for, let's just say, 8 miles in that sense, and how many steps it takes to go 8 miles. Roughly what we're going to just guesstimate, roughly about 8,000, depending on how long your stride is.
Mhm.
That's a lot of steps. And if you can reduce 10 pounds on each one of those steps, that's a heck of a lot less stress, whether it be on one of those supporting structures or if it's just your shoes in general. So you might extend certain things in equipment from a standpoint.
Mhm.
So I would look at it as explaining it to somebody in that overall number. And I don't have a calculator on me. I probably should have had that total number of pounds that you would actually prevent by taking off that 10 pounds. But I think 10 times 80 or 8,000 is, we're going to have what, 80,000 or whatever it might be, is quite a bit of pounds over the structure of your body. That's going to really end up leading to longevity. It's going to decrease some of the injuries that you're going to come across. And in the sense of decreasing that 10 pounds, one of the things that I found is that depending on what type of fitness you're currently in, you can remove 10 to 15 beats off of your operating heart rate, which again might be overlooked, but all of these factors are decreases of stress.
Mhm.
And when we can decrease the stress, but still get a quality amount of volume, a quality amount of intensity, there's going to be benefits to be made. So that is probably the area that I would start with in discussing this with somebody. Is just, I know I kind of spanned over a lot of different things with one focus, but it would be those areas that really just kind of help come together and manage overall stress.
Mhm. One, I guess, like line of dialogue that I'm kind of curious about is how you might recommend athletes. Again, let's say they're in a normal training plan, they're doing a long run per week. They have a tempo session per week, and maybe they have a couple easy days. And then depending on how many days they're running, maybe they have another speed workout day in there too. How would you best recommend somebody easily incorporating something? Because yes, if you imagine the visual of carrying 10 pounds on your back, taking it off, and then going out and doing that same exact run, or hopping on the treadmill, and more practically realistically, putting getting in the lever system, taking even, if it is 10 pounds, if it's 15 pounds, going for your normal easy run, all that stress, exactly like you highlighted, you are just removing that. You're still practicing the technique of running. You are, taking away that impact loading rate. You're reducing the ground force reactions, but then you're also moving your blood around your body, and you're promoting that recovery without necessarily focusing on going out there and improving your fitness. You're doing your normal day-to-day easy run. So that, I feel like, is very easily understood by people. But how would you maybe best recommend people incorporate it if they are following what I would consider probably a pretty normal training plan of, again, that long run, you have an easy run or two, maybe you have that threshold or tempo or speed or something. How would you recommend incorporating body weight support into that training plan?
Absolutely. And I would make very, very similar recommendations to a triathlete as I would to a runner in this sense. The one thing that I would probably incorporate with a triathlete that, of course, you wouldn't necessarily have to worry about with a runner is where their cycling stress is going to come from the week. So by putting together a plan, that would be something that I would incorporate into when we're going to pull the lever out and utilize it in that sense. But as far as a running structure as you presented, one first question I typically would want to know is the durability of our athlete. But let's just take, in a sense, somebody that probably gets a little more injury prone. I would have a different conversation with them and would probably look at having a one-on-one conversation with them instead of taking it kind of in a general sense like we're doing here. But in this particular sense, if we're just looking at an individual that is coming from a general background, fairly durable, does not currently have any injuries, and is just looking to improve on their basic general fitness, what I tend to recommend as far as utilization of the lever system is we get that long, slow run, aerobic as I call it, done on the open road. In that sense, we develop strength, endurance, we get the ground force, just developing the muscles to be able to handle that load. Traditionally, how I've started to utilize that is following that particular run. We typically have a follow-up, easier, shorter run the day after, or in some cases in your elites, they might be following it up with a shorter run later that day. I tend to follow that run, that long, slow distance run, or LSD as some call it, with a lever system run, typically in that 35 to 60-minute range, just to take off some of the resistance and tension. So body weight support on that follow-up to that long run. I traditionally then have one more day of easier running before we end up getting into whether it be their tempo or their speed work, as you put it. Traditionally, the way that I have started to incorporate is that I will have the athlete utilize just either open road or a trail for their tempo runs. What we're trying to do is feel what that effort is. And in that, I tend to move them off of the lever system because we're looking for that gauge. We're looking for kind of that race feel in those tempo runs. So I like to be that more in a normal element or environment in that particular stage. Then following that, I follow one of those speed workouts. And I think I did mention long run, short run, and I think I misspoke by saying another short run. Typically, I would move that shorter, easier aerobic run in between the tempo day and the speed day. Sorry, I misspoke on that piece. But so in that particular segment, I would have the longer, slow distance. I would then follow it up with the shorter aerobic run, tempo work, I would come back with another easier run. Traditionally, I adjust each week. One will be out on the road. The next week it would be on the lever system, and just
Mhm.
funnel that. Because again, as you talked about, Evan, it's more about just trying to get the circulation, just getting some additional positive miles. If I do have an athlete where we are working on a little bit of form or gait retraining,
Mhm.
I actually tend to make that weekly a lever run, just because then we can take a little bit of that weight off of their body and have them focus on whether it be the swing phase, whether it be the landing phase. All of these things we can incorporate certain aspects, and by decreasing that weight we're going to decrease the amount of fatigue through the run. So some of those gait retraining skills that I've provided to that athlete are probably going to be able to be extended through the course of that entire workout.
Mhm.
Typically, when we do full body, sometimes I find that it might be 15 minutes, it might be 10 minutes that they can give really focused work and not start to break down. But typically, I'll have to pull them off the treadmill or pull them off of the run just for a little length of time, and then get them to recuperate and then put them back into that environment. With the lever system, I do find those individuals getting great benefit from being able to consistently go for the timeline, whether it be a 35-minute run or a 40-minute run, but we're going focus on whatever the particular traits of that gait retraining are going to be in that particular sense. Then I do follow that up with that. Typically in my schedule, it's a Thursday. We have a little bit of speed work. And
Mhm.
in that, I really find that early in the season, we can get them out on the track when we're doing 400 and 800s. Typically, when we get into kind of that VO2 max or hit training, that's a little bit more of the longer duration.
Mhm.
So when I say longer duration, I look at things that are over kind of that 2 minute span.
Mhm.
Some will even say over that 60 minutes or 60-second span. I said, so that
60 minutes of VO2 would definitely be a unique
that would be a
training
bad
program,
day.
I think.
So those would definitely be 60 seconds or 2 minutes of work.
Mhm.
And traditionally, I then start to incorporate it into your 1K repeats or your 2K repeats. I tend to kind of find that as the sweet spot, because one, we're able to again add some additional stress with speed in that particular sense and open up some of the neuromuscular call, and even some of the transmitters between how fast you think you can go. Sometimes you can
Mhm.
really open up that speed with the lever system by removing some of the weight. And whether it be because we are taking a little bit of stress off of the heart, which allows us to go a little bit faster, or we're just taking some of the strain off of the body from not having the same ground impact rates, I find that both of these probably incorporate to ramping up their speed work just a little bit more and really getting them to find a new gear in a lot of ways that ends up translating into that tempo run the following week.
Yeah.
So that's kind of typically how I traditionally incorporate the lever into a week to week. It's typically 2 to 3 days. I still find that it is important to get those forces that we get just on a normal run. I don't think that it's something that you can rely on 100%. I know that I talked to you about possibly experimenting with putting on some forces, some like strength training forces before hopping on the lever, to see if this is something that will be able to kind of incorporate some of the better results by utilizing the lever more frequently for somebody that might either be in an injured state or frequently getting injured. This
Mhm.
is something that I do want to spend a little bit more time testing, but I think on the surface it makes a lot of sense to do some heavy forces before, and then leading into that lever system for all your different types of runs could have a great benefit. But at this point, traditionally 2 to 3 days a week is what I look, and it really seems to provide a lot more longevity on the body and provides what I've noticed as just better output from week to week.
Mhm. One point that I kind of want to echo there too, and I think it's the most important thing that you kind of ended with, is if people are used to following the same sort of training program, or they're just always doing the same thing. You think that you only have to go outdoors for a run and you only have to do the same experiences. You're kind of overlooking, again, like we talked about earlier, the advancements in running technology or overall endurance sports technology, but looking at the treadmill and then using lever as a training tool. So whether that is exactly doing like you're talking about, stimulating that type of muscle loading and then going and practicing good form without adding any of that extra impact that you might not need, or practicing running just a little bit faster than you may be able to do outside on the track or outside on a rolling terrain or outside in windy conditions, swirling conditions. And so really looking at how you can best use your training environment and use training tools to better your ability, that ends up being that thing that not only promotes that consistency, but really has an advancement in your training and understanding about what you actually can do. If you're stuck thinking, I can never run faster than my threshold, or my marathon pace is the fastest that I can ever hope to go, you really can unravel a lot of those expectations just by implementing different sort of training tools. The other sort of follow-up that I'd have for that is, do you have maybe an athlete story or two that you've noticed have used lever in any sort of way, or body weight support too in any sort of way, to positively impact their racing or training or general fitness lifestyle?
I have, well, one of them is going to be myself, because I'm pretty closely tied into myself in that sense as well. But I do
Hmm.
have an additional story with an athlete, and one of the things that you actually just talked about, Evan, was finding kind of that new race pace. And as I had talked about how I incorporated the lever system into my training, was almost identical to where I just came from with the explanation of how I would utilize it. And the one thing that I traditionally do is that tempo run in the middle of a competitive build into an event. And I set a pretty high standard for myself. I'm always trying to hit new expectations from that standpoint. And after an extended amount of time of doing the 1K repeats and really following up with the lighter loads on what is my Monday after the long run, what I really found to come was that higher output on my tempo runs. Next thing I
Mm.
know, I had taken off about pretty close to, after I did some tempo runs that were about 15 to 18K. And next thing I know, I'm shaving off about 10 to 11 seconds off of each K throughout that process, which is going to translate to about, closer to 23, 24 seconds on a mile time.
Hmm.
Um, Actually probably closer to 20 seconds on the mile time. And that really built up my confidence from the standpoint of what I felt like I was going to be able to hold
Hmm.
in the next half Ironman that I actually did at Oceanside, and felt like my top end speed was a heck of a lot faster than what it had been previously. And it was just a matter of being able to kind of open up some of those aspects of figuring out what my new ceiling was. And I felt like, whether it was the freshness coming into that run or just the higher increased speeds on my VO2 max work, I felt like it was a great opportunity, or it was a great foundation to really build my top end speed. Another thing with myself and then the other athletes that have been using this for my group is going in and utilizing it more effectively in the taper. What I
Mm.
found is, from the tapering standpoint, it has led to going into the event a little bit more fresh. And when you go into it, you're still kind of working that top end, because the way that I tend to traditionally work a taper is, we decrease the volume, but we still keep the high end work in that, whether it be a week, whether it be 2 weeks, but we end up doing some high intensity, but just a lot shorter duration in that sense. But what I found by incorporating the lever system, it kind of allowed those legs to really recover quicker and be fresher on race day. And that was in both of those aspects, where it has just led to better performance on race day because the legs had a little bit more gas in the tank. We
Mhm.
built up a couple more matchsticks throughout the process so we could burn them on race day.
I would also, argue too that the consistency you can get with an expectation for that last week or two heading into event, that is, the most important. Any coach and athlete will know that, like, that is crunch time. That's the thing where you don't want any surprises. You don't want to go out to the track and get kicked off, or like
Right.
find that there's a middle school football game that closed down your expectation. And if you can go into a race day, the last 7 to 14 days, that last sort of fitness moving window and stuff, but not have any guesses about how your taper is going to play out and know exactly how you're going to arrive on race day. Why would you not do that? It's almost like shaking a magic 8 ball and getting the exact answer that you expected, but that it is going to not take away from your race performance, but also it is going to not add any sort of anxiety or worry or stress if you did this right or if you did that right. If you can go through the same sort of routine that is targeted to you and your specific fitness that works, why wouldn't you do that?
Oh, absolutely. And I think you also bring another point off of that is kind of that lead in. We all have that nervousness of what's going to, we don't want any, like, I don't want a hamstring strain, or I don't want this. By taking a little bit of the body weight support process is going to take a little bit of that opportunity off the table. And I think it,
Mm-hmm.
again, kind of allows you to control a little bit more of the picture and come into that event in health and ready to kind of get after it.
Yeah, absolutely. You said you had at least one more athlete story to share before we do wrap up. Can you maybe tell us a little bit how another athlete that you coach or is a part of the training squad and training group has used bodyweight support for some sort of success in their buildups?
In this other athlete, they have, due to some health issues, have gained a little bit of weight, and in that process, it's always challenging when you're getting back into activity, especially when part of that has been adding additional weight to your support system. It can be very, very disheartening, and it can also be very challenging on the body itself.
Mhm.
And in this particular case, we have started to incorporate the lever running system to take off some of that additional weight. And the key for this individual is we don't want to beat their body up to get them back into the proper fitness to start putting a normal training process in place. And by being able to just take off a little bit of the weight off of the body, it takes that weight off of the joints. There's not as much compounding on the body. And really, in that sense, it's going to allow us to control the weight to allow the fitness to come back in. As the fitness starts to improve and the weight starts to decrease just because of the increased activity level, then we are able to start taking the lever system off. We're not putting the same stress on the joints, the muscles, and ligaments and tendons.
Mhm.
So from there, what we are really incorporating is the lever system to just allow for a healthy back to fitness process in this sense. And I have found that in that, it's been a very, very valuable product because this individual wants to be active. I
Mhm.
mean, they want to do the activity, but if we were going to do the activity under normal like protocols, it's going to put a lot of stress on their body. And this has just been a very, very much less stressful process. And we've been
Mhm.
able to get them back into being active and running, which is something that they want to do. And that's allowed them to really almost start that ball rolling downhill from a motivation standpoint. So it's been a powerful piece on a couple of different avenues from that aspect as well.
Absolutely. I love that. And I also, really appreciate the flexibility, but the individualization as well that comes from a coach like yourself and working with an athlete in a unique circumstance, but fitting to their needs specifically. if people are curious to learn a little bit more about you and coaching and what you do, where would you maybe direct them to go so they can learn more information?
All right. Well, the best place is going to be EndureIQ.com. That is, again, our coaching service. And we also have some educational aspects of coaching and long distance triathlon in that sense. I also am the host of S Fuel's Monday Mind Share, which is a YouTube channel that we discuss different types of topics on whether it be endurance, whether it be on nutrition, or combining the two.
Mhm.
We also have special guests on that. And I've also gone through a couple of product introductions on that particular podcast or YouTube channel as well. I am also on Instagram under @try_a_geyser. And I am on Facebook at Aaron Captain.
Very cool. We'll put all of those links in the show notes as well, anywhere people are listening to this or watching the video replay of this as well. You will be able to find all those links. Aaron, I want to thank you so much for coming on. This was, we had chatted previously, so I was already, blown away and astounded. We had some great discussion where we dove into some rabbit holes and stuff, but I love to be able to share and promote the knowledge that coaches and athletes like yourself are able to share with people, but then get it to a little bit bigger audience as well. So I want to thank you again for taking the time, and we really appreciate you coming on the show.
I appreciate you having me on the show and being able to use this platform to kind of talk about myself a little bit, but also share some implementation of training, because it is at what we do. It's the roots. So it's always good to have a platform to kind of talk about some of those aspects and get people moving forward in life.
Absolutely. Thank you so much again. And this wraps up this episode of the Lever Movement Podcast. We'll be back with another one shortly. Thanks everybody for tuning in. See you next time. Bye-bye.